In the 16th century, the world's greatest empire was not British, it was Spanish. From Mexico to Manila, one crown commanded an empire where the sun never set. Spain's ships carried gold and silver across oceans, filling Europe with a wealth no kingdom had ever imagined. Yet hidden beneath that glitter was rot, for what looked like infinite treasure would soon poison its own creators. If you love stories where wealth becomes a warning, make sure to subscribe, because history always repeats itself. When Spain stumbled into the New World after 1492, it struck a jackpot that seemed infinite. Gold from Mexico and silver from Peru poured into Spanish hands. The mines of Zacatecas and the mountain of Potosi turned conquest into industry. Every month, treasure fleets crossed the Atlantic, their hulls groaning with bullion. Between 1500 and 1650, Spain imported more silver than Europe had mined in 1,000 years. But real wealth is not what glitters, it's what endures. From Seville and Cadiz, Spanish ships spread silver across the globe, north to the Low Countries, east to the Mediterranean, and west to Manila. There, Spanish coins bought silk and porcelain from China, linking Asia, Europe, and the Americas in the first global economy. On maps, Spain looked invincible. In reality, the empire was fragile, built not on production, but on plunder, a house of gold standing on sand. While Spain's cities glowed with cathedrals and palaces, prices rose like wildfire. Bread, cloth, and tools became unaffordable for ordinary people. Between 1500 and 1600, inflation quadrupled prices. The empire had discovered the world's first great paradox. Too much silver made money worthless. Economists would later call it the price revolution, a century-long inflationary storm triggered by rivers of treasure chasing too few goods. The elites, nobles, merchants, bankers, handled the silver first and profited before prices adjusted. Common laborers and farmers, their wages fixed, watched their buying power collapse. Spain's mountains of bullion had become a weapon against its own people. The crown could tax the poor, borrow from bankers, and finance endless wars. But it could not buy stability. Wealth had become illusion, and illusion soon turned to debt. Instead of investing in workshops, farms, or trade networks, Spain spent its silver on imports and wars. Italian, Dutch, and German merchants grew rich selling luxuries to Spain, while Spanish craftsmen faded into poverty. It was easier to wait for the next treasure fleet than to build an economy. The empire became a consumer of foreign goods, a glittering giant hollowed from within. Spain's monarchs believed they were chosen by God to defend Catholicism across Europe. Silver-funded crusades against the Ottoman Turks, campaigns in the Netherlands, and the crushing of Protestant England. The Spanish Armada of 1588 was fueled by New World treasure, but when it failed, the empire's finances shattered. The greatest fleet on earth had sunk under the weight of its own gold. To sustain its wars, Spain borrowed endlessly. German families like the Fuggers and Genoese financiers lent money secured by future silver shipments. It was a perfect illusion, until a shipwreck or pirate raid delayed a fleet. Then, the empire defaulted. Between 1557 and 1607, Spain declared bankruptcy 4 times. The richest nation on earth could not pay its bills. Pirates soon joined the war for silver. England's Francis Drake and the Dutch privateer Piet Hein turned piracy into economic strategy. Every galleon captured meant more than lost treasure. It meant lost credit. In 1628, Hein seized an entire Spanish fleet worth 11 million guilders. One attack nearly toppled an empire. Spain's wealth now sailed with the wind, and the wind was faithless. Each loss shook Spain's financial core. Creditors went unpaid, taxes rose, and inflation deepened. England and the Netherlands reinvested their stolen silver, building navies, banks, and trade companies that would define modern capitalism. Spain's empire, still vast on maps, was quietly dying in ledgers. Its treasure fleets had become its chains. By the early 1600s, Spain looked mighty, but hollow. Its cathedrals still glittered, its flags still flew across oceans, yet the empire's foundations were eroding. Inflation devoured prosperity, and debt shackled the crown to foreign bankers. The flow of silver that once promised eternity had become a flood, washing away stability. Wealth had turned to dependency. The empire was consuming itself. Each treasure fleet became a gamble. When ships arrived safely in Seville, debts were paid, and celebrations rang through the city. When storms or pirates struck, markets panicked, and credit collapsed overnight. Spain had built a system that depended on the sea's mercy. Its fortune was a coin tossed into the Atlantic, glittering but uncertain where it would land. Across the Channel, England and the Netherlands studied Spain's mistakes. They realized silver alone was not power. Systems were. They built banks, chartered trading companies, and navies to protect commerce. While Spain waited for treasure fleets, its rivals created wealth that renewed itself. In London and Amsterdam, capitalism was being born, funded ironically by the silver Spain had lost. Spain's rulers could have transformed their empire. They could have invested in roads, education, and innovation, the foundations of true wealth. Instead, they treated silver as endless. Ministers borrowed against future shipments, believing the mines of Potosi would never run dry. But when faith replaces prudence, debt becomes destiny. Each coin borrowed was another stone in Spain's financial tomb. Between 1557 and 1607, Spain defaulted 4 times, an astonishing record for the world's richest power. Each default sent ripples through Europe's banking centers. Genoa, Antwerp, and Augsburg trembled as royal payments vanished. The richest crown on earth was the least reliable borrower. Trust, the true currency of finance, had abandoned Spain. Wars drained what silver remained. The 30 Years' War devoured fortunes in soldiers' pay and cannon metal. Spain fought for faith and prestige, not for solvency. Its empire was a believer's crusade against arithmetic, and arithmetic always wins. As treasure fleets dwindled and armies marched unpaid, rebellion smoldered in the Netherlands, and the crown's glory dimmed into exhaustion. By 1628, when Piet Hein captured Spain's Caribbean treasure fleet, the empire's illusion finally cracked. 11 million guilders vanished in one strike, and with them, confidence in Spain's power. The loss was not just of silver, but of faith. For an empire built on borrowed future, one missing fleet meant the future itself was gone. Spain's rivals reinvested what they stole. English shipyards built stronger vessels. Dutch bankers founded stock exchanges, and trade companies spread across Asia. Silver that had once belonged to Madrid now fueled the rise of capitalism's new capitals. The wheel of fortune had turned. Spain's plunder had become its own undoing. Wealth redistributed by wisdom. For ordinary Spaniards, the miracle had long soured. Bread prices rose beyond reach, taxes climbed, and soldiers returning from war found only poverty. The empire's golden age felt more like famine with decorations. Silver passed through Spain like rain through a sieve, enriching everyone except those who mined it, carried it, or paid for it in blood. By the mid-1600s, Spain still ruled half the world on paper, but in reality its strength was spent. Its ships were slower, its treasury empty, and its enemies organized. The empire had traded substance for spectacle, wealth for the appearance of it. And in that illusion lies history's oldest warning. What seems eternal can vanish overnight. Spain's system was built on extraction, not creation. The Americas existed to funnel wealth home, not to grow. Silver and gold sailed outward. Knowledge, skills, and industry never returned. The empire's merchants became courtiers, its workers became beggars, and its colonies became slaves to the crown's hunger. When treasure becomes purpose, purpose disappears. Britain and the Dutch learned a different lesson. Their colonies produced value, not just tribute. Tobacco, sugar, timber, and later cotton fueled industries that multiplied wealth. Instead of waiting for ships of silver, they built systems that made silver obsolete. Capitalism had begun its quiet revolution, the empire of ideas replacing the empire of minds. In Amsterdam, merchants founded the first stock exchange. In London, the Bank of England would one day master credit. These were not accidents, they were antidotes to Spain's disease. By turning trade into a system, not a gamble, the Dutch and English transformed wealth from metal to trust, the invisible gold that compounds across generations. Spain's silver once flooded Europe, now it drained away. Italian shipbuilders, Flemish merchants, and German bankers profited from every ducat that passed through Spanish hands. The crown spent, foreigners earned, and the balance of power shifted silently. Every coin spent abroad was another brick in England's future, and another chip off Spain's throne. By 1650, Spain's miracle had curdled into memory. Its once mighty fleets limped home, half empty and heavily taxed. Peasants whispered that God had cursed the silver. Economists today would call it a resource trap. Wealth so easy, it kills innovation. For Spain, the mines of the New World were not blessings. They were open graves filled with silver. The true cost of empire was not measured in gold, but in possibility. Spain's best minds joined the church, or the army, not industry. Innovation was seen as a defiance, profit as sin. When a nation confuses faith with finance, it builds cathedrals instead of factories, and prays while rivals build ships. By the late 1600s, Spain's rivals were unstoppable. The Dutch Republic ruled the seas with trade. England was rising with banks and colonies. Spain still had land, but not leverage. Its coinage, once coveted, was now debased by inflation and distrust. The empire that had ruled the world could not rule its own balance sheet. Yet even as Spain faded, its story endured as a warning. The illusion of wealth, sudden, glittering, intoxicating, blinds nations as easily as men. When easy money flows, hard discipline evaporates. Spain mistook motion for progress and gold for growth. History keeps the receipt. 4 centuries later, the pattern still repeats. Nations flood economies with paper or digital currency, mistaking liquidity for strength. Inflation erodes faith, debt chains the future, and leaders promise that prosperity can be printed. The silver of Potosi has become the stimulus of today. Different metal, same mirage. Spain's fall teaches a brutal truth. Treasure is not wealth, and conquest is not creation. Real wealth lies in systems that produce, not plunder, in discipline, trust, and work that endures when gold runs out. The Spanish Empire mistook fortune for foundation, and it collapsed beneath its own glitter. If you want more lessons where history reveals the cost of illusion, remember to subscribe. The past is speaking if you listen. When Spain defaulted, the shock spread through Europe's markets like thunder. Genoese lenders failed, Antwerp's merchants panicked, and northern bankers rewrote the rules of credit. Trust became the rarest currency. Spain's silver, once a symbol of faith, now bought only fear. In the empire's vaults lay not treasure, but the silence of unpaid debt. Meanwhile, England transformed scarcity into strategy. Without mines, it turned to innovation, shipbuilding, insurance, and finance. The Lloyd's coffee houses of London became nerve centers of risk and reward. From these smoky rooms emerged a system more powerful than any treasure fleet, the idea that credit, not metal, could move the world. In Amsterdam, the Dutch East India Company proved that collective investment could conquer oceans. Citizens bought shares instead of swords. Wealth grew through trust, not tribute. Spain's empire needed soldiers. Holland's empire needed shareholders. The future had shifted from the battlefield to the balance sheet. For Spain's peasants, none of this mattered. Bread was scarce, taxes relentless, and sons conscripted for wars that never ended. They saw galleons of silver vanish across the horizon, while hunger ruled their homes. The empire's riches never touched their tables. Prosperity sailed outward, poverty stayed ashore. Even the church, Spain's moral compass, could not stop the collapse. Cathedrals filled with silver altars, while their towns emptied of hope. Faith could not feed a family. Prayer could not pay a banker. When a nation mistakes divine favor for economic policy, its fall becomes a sermon written in debt. The Dutch and English reinvested their captured silver into institutions that multiplied it 100-fold. Spain spent its fortune once, its rivals spent it forever. That is the difference between consumption and capitalism. One ends when the ships sink, the other survives every storm. By 1700, Spain's empire was a relic. Its colonies remained vast, but their purpose was gone. Mexico and Peru mined silver not for greatness, but for interest payments. The empire existed to service its debts. What had begun as conquest ended as collection. Spain had become a creditor's museum. Yet Spain's decline gave birth to something larger, the modern world's obsession with growth. Every nation that followed studied its failure, learning to disguise extraction as enterprise. The machinery changed, the logic did not. We still chase silver by other names: profit, leverage, stimulus, or GDP. When historians look back, Spain's story reads like a parable written in ledgers. It shows that wealth without wisdom becomes weight, and power without purpose collapses under its own shine. Gold can build temples or tombs. The choice, as always, belongs to those who count it. In today's world, treasure fleets take new forms: cargo planes of capital, invisible flows of credit, and digital oceans of money. Nations no longer ship silver, but the illusion remains. We still believe more liquidity means more wealth. Spain's ghost sails through modern markets, whispering that abundance without balance leads only to ruin. When central banks flood economies with stimulus, they repeat Spain's mistake in a new language. Currency replaces silver, inflation replaces conquest, and the poor, once again, pay the price. Bread still costs more, wages still fall behind, and comfort still belongs to those closest to the mint. History's equation never really changed. Only its symbols did. Financial empires today depend on confidence, not cannons. When that confidence cracks, economies collapse faster than galleons in a storm. The lesson from 1600 echoes in 2008. When wealth is leveraged beyond reality, one lost ship or one failed bank can sink the fleet. Spain's collapse was not sudden. It was slow erosion disguised as glory. Each celebration funded by debt. Each victory borrowed from the future. That is how decline feels in real time: festive, patriotic, and completely unsustainable. Empires rarely die in silence. They sing while sinking. When gold blinded kings, they mistook shine for strength. Today, digital numbers blind nations the same way. Balance sheets sparkle, markets rise, and everyone feels rich until faith fades. Spain's silver was tangible, ours is theoretical. But both vanish the same way, in panic. The price revolution of the 1500s was the world's first inflationary experiment. Today's economies live in its shadow. Every stimulus check, every deficit, every quantitative easing is another ounce of silver from Potosi. Minted not from mines, but from faith. And faith, once spent, cannot be borrowed back. Spain's leaders believed treasure would make them eternal. Instead, it made them fragile. Wealth without restraint inflates pride faster than prices. Every empire built on consumption meets the same end: a ledger filled with excuses. Gold teaches humility only after it is gone. Even the pirates of Spain's time were more honest than the financiers of ours. They stole silver openly. Today's raiders use interest rates, speculation, and credit swaps, silent weapons that loot nations from within. Spain's seas have turned into spreadsheets, but the plunder continues. If Spain had built schools instead of armadas, banks instead of cathedrals, its empire might have endured. But it chose faith over foresight, spectacle over structure. In every century, someone repeats that choice. The settings change, the story does not. The world remembers Spain's gold, but forgets its warning. Wealth that arrives without work departs without mercy. Inflation, debt, and pride are patient executioners. When the richest empire in history mistook silver for strength, it wasn't just Spain that fell. It was humanity's first experiment with easy money, ending exactly as all such experiments do. The Spanish Empire died not in battle, but in balance sheets. Its enemies didn't conquer it. They outmanaged it. The pen, the contract, and the loan replaced the sword. When a nation loses control of its credit, it loses control of its destiny. Spain's crown glittered with borrowed light, and when that light went out, so did the empire. Silver once gave Spain command of the world, but silver could not teach it discipline nor humility. True wealth is moral as much as material. It comes from patience, from the will to build, not just to own. Spain mistook possession for progress, and progress for permanence. The correction came, as it always does, with interest. Every generation finds its own Potosi. For some, it is oil. For others, credit. For us, it may be digital wealth, numbers rising on screens, convincing us we're richer than we are. But when faith in numbers fades, history reopens the same account. Spain's ghost reminds us, liquidity is not legacy. Empires don't collapse overnight. They drift, distracted by comfort and applause. Spain's rulers celebrated every fleet, every cathedral, every parade, while the arithmetic of decline quietly wrote their obituary. Pride writes poetry, debt writes prose, and the prose of bankruptcy is universal. Even as it decayed, Spain taught its rivals how to rise. The English learned leverage. The Dutch mastered credit. The Americans, centuries later, would combine both. Every empire inherits the accounting of the last. The columns change, but the calculus of greed remains familiar. The world's richest empire became history's most expensive lesson. Spain's fall shows that prosperity without productivity breeds weakness. Easy money makes lazy nations. And in every century, someone repeats the pattern, believing that printing, mining, or borrowing can replace discipline. It never can. Spain's peasants once watched treasure fleets sail past their poverty. Today's workers watch markets rise beyond their reach. Technology replaced ships. Inequality remained. The distance between Seville and Potosi is the same as between Wall Street and Main Street, measured not in miles, but in fairness. Inflation, debt, speculation, these are not economic trends. They are human temptations. Spain's story endures because it is about character. When greed replaces gratitude, when expansion outruns wisdom, decline is only a matter of math. The world's richest empire collapsed not from invasion, but from indulgence. History doesn't punish, it instructs. Spain's failure is our textbook. Every time a nation forgets that value must be earned, the ghost of Potosi reappears, whispering through balance sheets and headlines alike. Silver was never Spain's curse, pride was. And pride, unlike silver, never runs out. Spain's empire proves one eternal truth: wealth without wisdom destroys itself. The same sun that once never set on its dominion now rises on its ruins. Every boom carries its bust. Every treasure fleet meets its storm. What matters is not the gold we gather, but the systems we build to last. If this story gave you perspective, subscribe and stay with us, because history has the answers.